But the reason why you're all here, not to hear me talk, but to hear Professor Steven Savino. So I'll let him take it away.
Well, thank you, Sean, and good evening, everyone. Those of you that are in drier climates than what we are here in the Northeast. Apparently, I guess Portland, Oregon's getting trounced as well between snow and rain. Is that right? It's that time of year. Well, welcome to this mini class. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Steve Savino. I'm a professor in the marketing department, and I'm also the assistant dean of graduate business programs here at Lehigh. I have been at Lehigh for the past, I think I'm in my 12th year now. And prior to that, I spent over 20 years in industry with, and I've been very fortunate to have been able to lead a number of multinational brands for some blue chip companies. So I have a lot of experience in brand management, and, today's topic, which is about marketing and how to build brand equity, is not just for consumer products. It works in really any business where obviously marketing is a critical function in terms of how to differentiate your product lines and then how to turn that strategy into action in your messaging and in your promotional activities. So this topic that we're going to talk about today, building brand equity. So I cover this topic in an elective course in our FLEX MBA program. So for example, most of you, if not all of you, are here to learn about the FLEX MBA program. I teach a summer elective in brand management. I also I have taught for, well over 10 years now in the FLEX MBA core, combined operations and marketing class titled Managing Products and Services, which is MBA 404. And we cover a lot of the tools that you're going to see here today. We also cover it in that class as well. And then also, if you're interested in the full-time MBA program, our one MBA program, the marketing knowledge course, I have taught that as well. And a lot of what you'll see tonight, we've also covered that. So really, when you think about this topic, building brand equity, it's all about whatever business you're in, consumer business, it can clearly be an industrial business, a B2B business. How do you create relevancy and then follow through on it in everything you do? Messaging, new product development, promotional platforms. There's a systematic way and a disciplined way of doing that. And that's what I hope to be able to take you through tonight. So what are we going to cover tonight? If you think about, if you give me a sec, I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see that okay? You all see that?
Yeah, you're good, Steve.
Perfect. Sorry.
Yes,
Thank you.
we do.
Thank you. So if you think about it, in terms of the marketing process, what's our end game? Our end game is to create and extend customer lifetime value. That's really what the end game is. And there's an assessment phase that we go through in marketing. We simply call that planning, how to identify opportunities. We go through a strategy and action phase, and that's all about activation. And then within that, how do we continue to build the brand, maintain the equity of the brand? So what you see on this diagram, so to speak, of assessment versus strategy versus action. In the interest of time tonight, I'm not going to cover all of them, but I'm going to hit on a few things. And those are the areas that are in yellow. All of you, I'll bet you in your business, you do a SWOT analysis. Am I correct? You identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm going to show you a way to do a hybrid of a SWOT analysis that I think gets at a better approach to identifying opportunities, because once you identify the opportunities, then you go into building out the brand, and then from that, managing the brand equity. Must-win battles. So in a SWOT analysis, you have strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, but oftentimes you find the opportunities are a laundry list of things that the company would like to do, almost like a wish list, but you don't have either the manpower or the financial resources to take it all on. Must-win battles prioritizes that. It gets it down to a tight-knit group, and you activate the entire organization around those must-win battles. So I'm going to show you how you can take a disciplined approach to that. Then you get into the branding side of things, and within branding, it's positioning. What place in the customer's mind do we want to own? So if I said to you as an example, what do you think of when you think of Volvo? What do you say?
Safety.
Safety. Very good, Alex. Alex, by the way, did you know it's not the safest car on the road? And you know what, Alex? And you know what? It doesn't matter. What matters is that the cars are safe, but they were first in the customer's mind with that proposition. And they built on it and they own it. And by the way, why has Volvo been struggling a little bit in the US market in the last few years? Because they walked away from safety as a messaging and they started to talk about things that may be true about their cars, high performance. They talked about, a cars perform as well as a BMW, the luxury aspects of their car, all true, but that's not why someone thinks about Volvo. And so when they bring it all back to this idea of safety, in fact, I saw a Volvo commercial the other day. They had a family backing out of a driveway, and one of their new safety features is it recognizes that there's an obstacle coming from either side, and it automatically stops the car. It doesn't even rely on the driver. So the place in the customer's mind that we want to own is singular in nature. If you're in a position, you're in a job, you're in a company where your boss says to you, we want to be all things to all people. I want you to do yourselves a favor. I want you to update your resume and find another job. Because I'm telling you, that's not how it works. Positioning is all about sacrifice. You've got to give something up in order to gain something. Volvo has to own safety. And if they own safety, that is the reason for being in terms of why they make their way into what we call someone's consideration set or their evoke set when they think of a brand that they might buy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about other elements of branding. I'm going to introduce a new model to you called the Brand Activation Matrix. You see it there on your screen as the BAM model. And we'll talk about new product development. And I'm going to talk about how you extend the brand and some examples from that. Again, what is the goal? The end game is to find different ways to grow our customer lifetime value. So let's start with SWOT analysis. You've all seen this, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you know that you always want to capitalize on your strengths. You want to shore up any weaknesses. You want to at least identify threats, and you want to invest in opportunities. The issue is, how do you cherry pick those opportunities to invest in? How do you prioritize them? And if I gave you an example, this is actually a SWOT analysis from Ben & Jerry's, the traditional SWOT analysis. And just focus for a minute on strengths. So would you all agree Ben & Jerry's is a prestigious, well-known brand? Would you all agree that they have a large share of the super premium ice cream market? Okay.
Definitely.
Widely recognized for a lot of the value things that they do, social value things that they do. And they call that their strengths. Here's my question. If I said to you, they're a prestigious, well-known brand in the super premium segment of the ice cream market, can I not also say that about Haagen-Dazs? I think I can. And if I can, then it might be a strength, but it's not a competitive advantage. And so how do you, instead of thinking of SWOT analysis in the context of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, how do you think about it in the context of competitive advantages, vulnerabilities instead of weaknesses? Because if we have the same weakness as a competitor, then they kind of offset each other. But where are we really vulnerable? It's nice to identify threats, but the question is, where are those risks imminent? And if you think of SWOT analysis this way, then one could argue that if we combine our competitive advantages with our vulnerabilities and whatever risks are imminent, it will lead us to a set of must-win battles. And by the way, those must-win battles, they are a handful, not a laundry list that goes on and on and on, because the reality is you would never be able to operationalize all of them. And the other thing about must-win battles, and I will give you an example in a minute, is that the key to being successful in implementing those must-win battles is to mobilize the entire organization around it. So if you're in marketing, right, Andrea? You're in marketing, am I correct? So you're going to have a set of marketing must-win battles that are associated with whatever brands that you're working on. But if you're in supply chain, you're also going to have a different take on those same must-win battles. And if you're in sales, you're going to have a different take on those must-win battles. So here's the point. If you have to find ways to build these must-win battles into everybody's key performance objectives. I've gone to companies, blue chip companies, decent sized companies, and I asked their middle managers in marketing, I asked them, what's the strategy of the company? And I can't tell you how many times they look at me like, I'm not really sure how to answer that question. Don't you think there's a problem? If we've got people, brand manager level, marketing manager level, that cannot articulate the strategy of the company, must-win battles, if we build it into our key performance objectives, then everybody's mobilized against them. And what Andrea does in marketing and sales is different than what Dana does in her field or what Andrew does in his field. And so that's how the company should be thinking about things. So how do you go from traditional SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, into this idea of competitive advantages, vulnerabilities, imminent risks, and must-win battles? One way to look at it is to look at 3 buckets: marketing and communications, customer issues, and operational structure. And determine within your companies what factors within each of these buckets are mission critical for our company. And so if I peel back this envelope just a little bit deeper and give you, just to highlight a few things, and again, it will vary by industry to industry, company to company. But for example, for some companies, it could be about available resources. For other companies, it could be about formulating strategic alliances, because we know if we formulate strategic alliances, that can lead to a competitive advantage. And that strategic alliance, whatever it might be, and I will give you examples in a minute, can delight the customer. Don't just satisfy the customer, but delight the customer. When you think about customer issues, and for example, a customer satisfaction level, how many of you in your companies do your companies measure net promoter scores? Andrea, and do you actually act on it? Does the company do anything with it?
We try to.
So here's what a net promoter score basically entails. You survey your customers and you're trying to get a sense of their satisfaction. And it poses one question to that user. And the question is, on some scale, call it 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever, 10 high, 1 low, to what degree are you satisfied enough with the product or service you use that you are willing to put your personal capital at risk and recommend that product or service to a family member or friend? Now you're really saying, I gotta really like this product if I'm going to recommend it to a family member or a friend. And in Net Promoter Score, the way the tool works, if you score a 9 or a 10, that makes you a promoter. If you score a 7 or 8, it suggests you're passive. And a 6 or below suggests that not good enough, you're a detractor. And then to calculate your Net Promoter Score is you take the percent of promoters minus the percent of detractors, and you're going to come up with a net number. Hopefully it's positive. And then you compare that to others in your industry. So here's what they do at retail automobile dealerships. If you bought a car recently, you might have noticed that they ask you before you leave the lot, you're going to get a survey from us, and we'd like you to please rate us the highest score you possibly can. And of course, by the way, that's cheating because you're already creating bias in a customer's response. But why do they do that? They do that because they want to achieve a high Net Promoter Score, because those dealerships that get the highest Net Promoter Scores get first dibs on the car inventories that come out from the manufacturing plants. That's why they do that. By the way, try using it to your advantage next time and negotiate more deduction off the price by being willing to give them a high rating. Think about that one too. So let me just go back for a sec. So anyway, that's satisfaction levels in terms of Net Promoter Scores, because high promoter scores leads to advocates. Advocates leads to high trial. So if you think about it, why do companies want you to why do they want you to like their Facebook page? People say, what is that about? Why do we want you to like? Likes lead to trial, folks. It's about how social media, and we are social animals, and we tend to follow others. If more and more people like a brand, then we should seriously consider that brand. And so likes, mentions, and shares, which drives advocates, comes from high Net Promoter Scores, and that leads to trial. And then operational structure. How can we improve our core competencies? Do we have levels of expertise and staffing? Interestingly, if you go back to the Ben & Jerry's, I don't know why it's doing that. The Ben & Jerry's SWOT analysis, they talk about one of their weaknesses having been the need to hire experienced managers. Think about who Ben & Jerry are. Literally, there are a couple of guys that invented these ice cream concoctions, and they've got beards down to their knees, and they sit up there in the woods of Vermont, but they're not actually seasoned business people. And they said, we need to hire a few pointy head MBAs. And so instead of going out and actually hiring some MBAs to run their business, they allowed their business to be bought by a MBA type run organization. In this case, it was Unilever, and became part of their ice cream division. So, and that emerged from their SWOT analysis. That's something for them to consider doing. So when you think about competitive advantages, where can we dominate, and how can we utilize Net Promoter Scores to our advantage? And again, I'm going to come back with an example of all this. With vulnerabilities, are we myopic? Come into our program, one of your first readings, certainly in a marketing course, is going to be a famous Harvard Business Review article, Marketing Myopia. And it talks about how the mistake marketers make is that they limit their thinking in terms of the business that they operate in. So for example, Amtrak thought it was in the railroad business, didn't recognize we're in the transportation business, something much broader. That they had recognized that, they may have led them to recognize where transportation trends were going. More people were driving cars, wanted to drive their cars, or they were flying. Amtrak could have went into some partnership or alliance with an airline or with a rental car company. And oh, by the way, in branding, If they had done that, don't call it Amtrak, because a brand can only stand for one thing. Call it something else. Just like Volvo. Volvo wants to say that they have these cars that are high performance cars. Beautiful. Don't call it Volvo. Brand it something else. I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of work, creating a new brand. Yes, it is. Not only work, but a lot of resources that has to go into that in the way of building the awareness of the brand and everything else that goes with it. So to avoid being myopic, you want to create blue oceans. How many of you ever read the book Blue Ocean Strategy? It's a must read. It's your homework assignment. It is a great book. It's an easy read, and it talks about different companies that created blue oceans. And the reason it's called the blue ocean is why? Anybody have a sense of why is it called the blue ocean?
Well, a term we use in marketing, blue sky initiative. So it's kind of like forcing yourself outside of what the traditional box would be.
Right. There's no competition there.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite is the red ocean. Why is it red? Because it's a bloodbath. That's why. It's a competitive bloodbath. That's why it's red. And so Blue Ocean Strategy is all about creating opportunities that don't exist. Think about some great Blue Ocean Strategy ideas. One was IKEA. IKEA completely rewrote the book on furniture retailing. You buy the furniture on impulse. Andrea went to the IKEA looking for the lamp. We sent her up and down the yellow brick road till she finally got in the store to where the lamp is. But along the way, she bought all these other things on impulse. Who ever heard of such a thing, buying furniture on impulse? Oh, by the way, Andrea, you got to bring it home yourself. You got to throw it in your car, bring it home yourself. You have to assemble it yourself, and you get no sales help in the car, but you get a great price. How many of you have been to an IKEA and you see that person in the parking lot on the phone calling someone to send a bigger truck? I bought more than I planned and I can't fit it in the car or the truck. Again, a great blue ocean idea. Another classic example was Swatch being a fashion accessory more than a timepiece. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Eminent risks. The threat of substitutes. Who's the direct competitor to Coca-Cola?
Pepsi.
Pepsi, right? You think the Coke brand manager lies awake at night worrying about what Pepsi is doing? And the Pepsi brand manager lies awake at night worrying about what Coca-Cola is doing? You can bet that they are. But substitutes are where they failed to recognize energy drinks and then got blindsided by them. And so all of a sudden that's taking all this business away from, I'll call it sugar water. And so what did they end up doing later on? They either create their own brands or they buy brands in that space. So you know that indirect competition or substitutes are risks that can be imminent, and they emerge from threats if we're just willing to open our eyes and see it. And then also the must-win battles that emerge from these opportunities. How can a must-win battle could be formed in the context of a strategic alliance or a co-branding opportunity or a co-creation opportunity? Let me give you an example. You've all seen this, right? Lay's potato chips. What do you see in the upper left corner of the package?
Grab bag.
Big grab.
Big grab bag. Oh my gosh. Big grab.
Big grab. Basically, it's a single serve Lay's potato chips, but it's in a bigger package. And how did that come about? You know how that came about? 7-Eleven, the biggest customer for Frito-Lay, recognized that their core customer, which is a blue-collar male, is looking for a belly filler bigger than most of the belly fillers that are being supplied to them by their suppliers like Frito-Lay. And so they went to Frito-Lay and they say, why don't you take your individual serving size packages and extend the size just enough so that it's more satisfying to that blue-collar male that's looking for that quick fix, so to speak, in terms of trying to eat while they're on the run. And that's where the idea came from. And in a partnership, what 7-Eleven said to Frito-Lay, no need to thank us for the idea, just give us the product exclusively for the first 6 months. And that led to things like you see now. When you go and you see king size Snickers, where did that come from? Same idea. The target market was screaming for something different in the way of packaging, and being able to partner with your customers led to that. So again, 7-Eleven and M&M Mars to create a bigger size Snickers bar. Co-branding. Here's an example of Bon Bell, which is a lip balm, wanting to utilize a flavor and branding it Dr. Pepper. So what does Dr. Pepper get out of it? They're able to extend their presence, the awareness of their brand, and to give people a different way to experience their brand in a co-branding sense. Co-creation. Classic example is Sherwin-Williams. If I want peach color paint, I cannot walk into a Sherwin-Williams and buy a can of peach color paint. It's a combination of some mix. What's always the base?
White.
White, very good. But so they sell it into their stores in a postponement sense, meaning it's not a finished product. The way it becomes a finished product is the consumer co-creates it. And by the way, that's a much better opportunity for this company, Sherwin-Williams, in the way of the supply chain. We don't have to have all these different you think about the swatches that you look at for paint. We'd have to create every single one of those and put it in a can. No, we do it on the spot. We do it in a co-creation sense. So let's come back to what we just were talking about. Here's a traditional SWOT analysis for Six Flags. Some strengths: geographic coverage. We're in multiple markets, high unaided brand awareness. We have these associations with Warner Brothers and the Cartoon Network. Warner Brothers own DC Comics, and so you have Batman the Ride and Superman the Escape, and all that stuff is part of what Six Flags was able to create. But look at their list of opportunities. They could never go in and address every single one of them. In fact, at Six Flags, I know it because I lived it when they were part of Time Warner. They had, at the time, 12 different theme parks, 12 different ad agencies, 12 different ad campaigns. How inefficient is that? What did we do? We consolidated everything. One agency, one national campaign, and then promotionally, there were some local executions. So in the new context of SWOT analysis, look what you end up with. Instead of strengths, you have competitive advantages. They get to use the themes of Batman and Superman. No other theme park can. That's an advantage. They still have some vulnerabilities. The parks somewhat come across somewhat as dated, and therefore there's quality perceptions. There are some imminent risks, and the biggest imminent risk that's within your control to some degree is non-theme park competition, or what I'll call substitutes, indirect competition. So if Sony Pictures is launching over the summer, another Spider-Man movie. All of a sudden, we're in competition on a Saturday afternoon in July with teenagers going to the movie theater. Not a good thing. But the competitive advantages, the vulnerabilities, and the imminent risks lead to a set of must-win battles. Notice there's only 5. It's manageable. How do you now take those must-win battles and apply them to everybody's key performance objectives? So here's what the 2 most important ones there. We're moving toward value-added promotion in place of discounting and driving their main gate as a higher % of their business. I want you to think about how it was working. They're promoting roughly 50% of their revenue line through price promotion. For example, $10 off, and you see it advertised on the ring of a Coke can. Or there's a coupon book placed at a Burger King, for X amount off. Yet the target audience for Six Flags is a teenager. They're not price sensitive. Teenagers don't clip coupons. Will the teenager utilize the Coke can to get a deal? Of course they will, if you give it to them. But if you dial some of that back, you're able to drive more of your main gate as a % of your business. And that's a big difference maker in terms of revenue. How bad was discounting at Six Flags? If you walked up to pay to get into the park, the cashier would ask you, Alex, do you have a coupon? And if Alex said no, you know what they would do? No problem. I'll just take one of these and scan it for you. Folks, what are we doing? What are we doing? It'd be like Alex saying, I'm gonna write a check to attend Lehigh University. Hold on, Alex. Let us discount that first before you pay that tuition. Who does that in their business? But that's how bad it was. So when you think about must-win battles, think about the prototypical ones and how they can apply to your business. Reducing or eliminating margin eroding programs. How many of you in your business, is there some degree of deals, price promotions? It doesn't even have to be a consumer product, but where you have to operate on deals. How do you target those discounts so that you're actually discriminating? You're not giving it to your loyal customers. You're giving it to the ones that tend to switch between different companies or different brands. Partnering with customers. If you're in a packaged goods business, how can you partner with a retailer? Generating fuel for growth. How do you build partnerships and alliances? Broadening your visibility and your distribution. So, for example, in the supermarket business, here's how people actually shop. They go into a supermarket and they tend to, in terms of large percentages, they shop the perimeter of the store. And they only go into the aisles when they need something in those aisles. So the deadest part of the store is, for example, the pasta aisle. If I'm not in the market for pasta, I'm not in the market for pasta sauce. So if I'm selling ragu, I don't get a sale today unless I find a way to merchandise around the perimeter of the store, which is the way people shop. And I can't do that unless I create line extensions or brand extensions that lend themselves well. So for example, Ragu created a product called Rich and Meaty, which was to be used on sandwiches, like Sloppy Joe sandwiches. Where did they actually place the product? In the bakery aisle, in the fresh bread aisle. They had a sauce that goes with chicken. Where did they place that? In the meat section, where the chicken was being merchandised. And so how do we merchandise out of aisle? And then lastly, how do we own some emerging markets? So all of this comes down to managing the marketing mix And with the marketing mix being the 4 P's of marketing: product, place, price, and promotion. And within that, how do you manipulate them into a cohesive strategy? When you do that, there are only 4 factors you can possibly affect. On the push side, the availability of the product and the visibility of the product. How widely available are we and how visible are we? On the pull side, how do I create demand? How do I create preference for my product? How do I create what's called resistance to compromise? Meaning that there's a high willingness to search for the product. So if the product's not available in a store, I don't simply buy a competitor product, I go buy it somewhere else, or I delay the purchase. Wouldn't that be nice if we had high resistance to compromise? So you affect push and you affect pull, and collectively they drive market share. Market share is what gives you leverage over your channel partners. The higher the market share, the more things you can demand that they do. The lower the market share, the less leverage that you have. And so with pull, it's about quality. For pricing, it's about having a prestige price. I sell it in specialty retail, and I use image in my advertising. That's why if I'm driving pull, that's what I want to see happen in the 4 Ps. If I'm driving push, then it's a commodity type business. Discounting matters. I want to be in mass merchandisers because volume will matter. And the reason volume will matter is because I'm doing a lot of discounting. And then sales and point of sale promotions are going to be very, very important. And it comes down to resources. If I ask you, what do managers do? Please don't say they manage. The answer is managers, and you're all managers in your companies, managers allocate resources, financial resources, human capital resources. And that means picking and choosing your battles. So when you think about resource allocation, you know, the growth share matrix, which was developed by the Boston Consulting Group back in the 60s, it was about senior management allocating resources. They said we have certain brands that are cash cows. We have certain brands that are stars. We're going to invest in those brands. We're not telling you how to invest. We're just telling you that we will invest. We have certain brands that are question marks. We have to pick and choose our battles between them. And we have certain brands that are dogs we want to get out of. And we build out this matrix based on how high or not so high the growth is in the segment we compete in, and how high or not so high is our market share. So an example would be if you looked at Anheuser-Busch. And by the way, this example is pre-InBev merger. But if you look at Anheuser-Busch, what are their cash cows? Budweiser, Bud Light, Michelob, Busch. They generate a lot of cash for the company. They're in low growth markets, but they have high share. But we use that to drive our stars. Michelob Ultra, high growth market, high share within that segment. Bud Light Lime, believe it or not, it's a seasonal product, but a dominating player during that season. O'Doul's with non-alcohol. Now, that's starting to change. The growth is starting to come down on that. And if it does, that means O'Doul's may shift to a different quadrant. By the way, on Michelob Ultra, just to touch on that, Anheuser-Busch knew that if Michelob Ultra is successful, it's going to kill another brand. What brand was it?
Bud Light?
Not Bud Light, but you're close.
Natural Light?
Michelob Light.
Michelob.
So think about this. Why would I settle for low calories, which is Michelob Light, when I can settle for both low calories and low carbs? So Michelob Ultra led Michelob Light to just have no more reason for being. And that has shifted. Brand still exists, but again, nowhere near the success it once was. So now we know what we're going to invest in. And the issue is how to invest in those brands. And that's where the brand activation matrix comes into play. So you can have brands that have high relative equity. People want it, but they're not buying it, as evidenced by low market share. Mercedes-Benz was faced with this problem. Everybody wanted a Mercedes-Benz, but very few people were buying it. A lot of that was based on two reasons: price and availability. Where can I buy it? What was the single move that Mercedes-Benz made to be able to shift to higher market share and in effect from a hide and seek to an attention getter? I'll give you a hint. They introduced a product.
Oh, Mini Cooper?
No, under the Mercedes name.
Oh, Mercedes. Oh, sorry. I'm thinking BMW. Never mind.
The AMG.
The C-Class. So the C-Class did not alienate the core Mercedes user. The C-Class just enabled more and more people to get into the Mercedes brand. In order for that to be successful, they had to widen their distribution, build out more dealerships. That enabled them to shift toward the attention getter box. Now, a Lonely Hearts brand, not very relevant. Low share, low equity. Nobody wants us. Nobody loves us. That's where price promotion comes into play. That's where you have to try to make price a big deal and get people to buy the product based on price. A daydreamer brand is very vulnerable. It has high share, but people actually prefer other brands. An example of that was what I experienced when I took on the brand years ago, Smirnoff. Another example was Chevrolet. High market share, low equity. People actually would prefer to drive a different car. People actually preferred to consume a different white spirit, a different vodka. And so you had to do things from a creative standpoint to try to change that. And that's what those brands did. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into the Smirnoff example in a few minutes. So let's get to the heart of the matter here, this idea of positioning. It's all about sacrifice. How do we create differentiation? I just drew this up before class, which is why it's in the form that it is. But I wanted to use Swatch as an example of great positioning. The Swiss dominated watches as jewelry that were high priced, Swiss watch companies. Timex dominated low price watches that were used as tools. And the Japanese companies like Casio dominated watches as jewelry that were low priced. Swatch found a place in the customer's mind that was a blue ocean. Watches as a fashion accessory. And that means where we sell it is different. It's sold in a department store, not in a jewelry store. You need more than one because fashions come and go. It has to be low price because as a fashion moves into a new realm, you want to get rid of the old and bring in the new. You want people to come back and buy more. So what Swatch did and what made it successful is they would introduce 2 new lines a year, 70 stock keeping units per line. That means you had your choice of 140 different swatches every single year. And it was priced low so that you could buy multiple ones. Really quite a brilliant strategy. So in building the brand architecture, what we're after is that middle box, the brand essence. I call it the brand essence or the core value. What place in the customer's mind do we want to own? So when I say to you, Volvo equals safety, safety in and of itself is not a business proposition. So we translate that into what we call a brand promise or in a marketing textbook sense, it would be a brand positioning statement. Everything you see in blue down below, innovation or new products, advertising, promotional platforms, those are all tactics that emerge afterwards. Because we take that brand promise and we put it into a creative brief and we say to an ad agency, I don't care if the ads that you create make me laugh or make me cry, but they better execute against this brand promise or it's off strategy. That's how disciplined we have to be. Now, this process is very abstract, and some people have a difficult time with that. But it's the most important thing we can do strategically in marketing is to build this brand architecture. What is our brand essence? How does that translate into a business proposition or what we call a brand promise? You know, Churchill once said, difficulties mastered or opportunities won. Not an easy process, takes time to do it. Here's what's at issue. That brand essence has to be single-minded, has to be ownable, and has to be defendable. And you cannot compromise on any of those three principles. You're trying to create a value proposition, a unique selling proposition that addresses the customer's needs or the customer's wants, but your competitor doesn't compete on that platform. What is that place that we can own in the customer's mind, that we can leverage, that we can back with a unique selling proposition that our competition cannot do? That's really a question that we have to be able to address. So here's a tool that you can use. I call it the pyramid model. You always start at the bottom of the model in constructing the brand. The physical attributes anybody can copy, but they do translate into benefits. Benefits that are rational, benefits that are emotional. We want to work ourselves toward a brand personality and then this idea of a brand essence or core value. Those top two boxes, that's what we should be advertising. The physical attributes reinforces that. Let's look at how it worked for Volvo. And again, I won't go through all this in great detail, but just to share with you, their product attributes, they've got steel frame, they got energy absorbing impact zones in the car, they've got restraint systems, airbags all around the car. Guess what, folks? Anybody can do that. But there are benefits to that, both rational and emotional. And again, you want to get the brand to a visceral level, an emotional level. So we end up with this core value of safety. And what we said is, in and of itself, safety is not a business proposition. So we translate that into a brand promise. So Volvo's brand promise is we minimize the risk of injury with a road hazard. We never jeopardize the well-being of our passengers. Now, Volvo is not saying you won't get into an accident. You might be a lousy driver. But what they are saying is that if you do get into an accident, the probability is higher that you'll walk away. That's what we want you to take away when you think of Volvo. Now, in a textbook sense, this would be a full-blown positioning statement. The only difference is that you would overlay to this the target market. So what Volvo does is they take the target market, which they get in psychographic and lifestyle segmentation, and the VALS database, value and lifestyle segments, and they pull achievers. There's a whole descriptor of what achievers are in the VALS database, and that's who they're going after. So for achievers seeking a European-style driving experience, Volvo minimizes the risk of injury with road hazard, never jeopardizing the well-being of their passengers. So let's talk about how do we get to the right answer here? And the way to look at it, you know, in building out that pyramid model, the way to look at it is we should be able to identify key drivers. These are the factors that are associated with usage of our product category. Key definers is what makes us unique. And I'm going to show you how you can figure out what are the definers that make us unique. Unknown drivers are factors that are associated with usage, but we don't differentiate on it. And as a brand, we ought to forget about it. Don't try to be something that you're not. So this is the last piece of what I'm going to do tonight because I'm looking at the clock. How do we fill in the blanks here? Especially, and I'll give you an example as well, especially as it relates to these key definers. So there, who was a marketing major at Lehigh undergrad? Andrea, you must have had,
I was.
did you have Professor Muskolka?
Yes, I love Professor Muskolka.
I'll tell Professor Muskolka. We always joke with Professor Muskolka.
I was the president of the marketing club.
Were you?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Tell him I say hi.
I will do that. We always joke with Professor Muskolka. We say, Professor Muskolka, when we get some of your former students and they come into our MBA program, no worries, we can always retrain them. So Professor Muskolka probably introduced you to a model called the Fishbein model.
Yeah.
And the Fishbein model is a multi-attribute model, and it looks like this, and don't get scared by this because this is not what's important. Here's what it really does. It lists out attributes that are associated with using a product. And it has the customers, consumers, if you will, weight those attributes in terms of their relative importance.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have 5 attributes associated with consuming cookies, as a consumer, if I was researching consumers, I would ask them, tell me how important taste is. Tell me how important texture is. How important is freshness, other factors like that. But they're relative to each other because it has to add to 100. Then we go in and we say, okay, here's a brand, Chips Ahoy. Rate Chips Ahoy on a scale of 1 to 10 on taste. Rate Chips Ahoy on a scale of 1 to 10 on texture, so on and so forth. We take the importance weight times the score to come up with an attribute score. We then add it to an overall brand score. Let me explain what we're doing here. And I'll use it as an example. Let's say you're the brand manager on Slick toothpaste, and you're up against a brand called Colgate. And you're trying to figure out what attributes should we leverage. Again, go back to defining our brand positioning. We're looking for those definers that make us different. And that's what we want to leverage. So let's assume that the 5 attributes that we isolate from research, consumers tell us these are the 5 most important attributes associated with brushing my teeth. Taste of the toothpaste, cleaning ability, tooth decay prevention, package design, and brand name. We then ask consumers, relative to each other, how important is taste? And they say that's about 25%. And cleaning ability is 20%. And tooth decay prevention is 20%. Package design, 15%. Brand name, 20%. In effect, what they're doing is they're saying on a scale of 100, break it down for each of those attributes, the relative importance of the attribute, not the brand, the attribute. Now we introduce the brand to them. And we say, if you have either experienced Slick toothpaste or you have a perception of Slick toothpaste, how do you rate Slick on a scale of 1 to 10 on taste? 10 high, 1 low. And they do a rating. And we have, again, in research, you do this with consumers. And let's assume this is the data that we got. We take the evaluation times the importance weight. I'm going from left to right. And we come up with a score for the attribute for Slick. And then we add it to a total score. And in this case, it ends up at 5.3. Now, the attributes don't change. The importance weights don't change. But now we introduce another brand. We say, what is it for Colgate? The only thing that changes is their perception of brand Colgate based on either experiencing the brand or their perception of the brand. And let's say these were the scores that Colgate generated. And again, we do the math from left to right, come up with attribute scores, and we add it to a total, and they come out ahead at 6.1. Now, the fact that they came out ahead is a key point we'll come back to in a minute. So let's say you're the brand manager on Slick toothpaste. What attributes would you leverage? Here's a hint. You always leverage your strengths. And then tell me how you would leverage it. First of all, what would you leverage? This is what consumers tell you they think of when they think of Slick.
Cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention.
Very good. Because Slick scored lower than Colgate overall, the way to leverage it is relative to the competitor. So for example, they would be, to Andrea's point, they would leverage cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention versus Colgate in order to try to offset their weaknesses. Indirectly, what they're saying to consumers, I know we don't taste very good, but you know what? Compared to the leading brand, we do a better job of cleaning your teeth and preventing tooth decay. So now if you translate strategy into action, you might come up with an ad campaign that utilizes dentists. More dentists recommend Slick because it's better than the leading brand at cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention. On the other hand, if you're Colgate, what would you leverage?
Taste and brand.
Yeah, brand awareness and taste. And the way you would leverage it, because you scored higher overall, is you don't even admit there is competition. All you want to do, if you're Colgate, is to remind people we're the leading brand that tastes great. People care about that. Why? Well, taste actually had the highest importance weight. Now, question, Brendan, you're Slick. Do you want to go back to R&D and say, fix the taste problem?
No, you want to hone in on what you're good at. Stay with your strength.
Very good. Anybody want to fix the taste problem? And you know what? So let's say, Andrea, R&D comes back to you and they say, that's not a problem. But what will happen is it will cost you on cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention. To put better taste into the product, it will hurt us on cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention. You still want to fix the taste?
No.
Here's what we don't know, folks. Do we score high among those that have perception of Slick on cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention because it doesn't taste good?
Well, it would depend on the level of brand awareness that we have.
Very good. So let's go back to what we were trying to solve here. We wanted to fill in these blanks. We can use the tool like the fishbone model to figure out what should we leverage. If I'm Slick toothpaste, cleaning ability and tooth decay prevention. Relative to the leading brand, we're better. So now let's look at how we fill in the blanks using brand Six Flags, and then we'll wrap this discussion up. There are key drivers associated with using a theme park. As many of those factors that we can put into the park, the better. But the definers that make us different, like what we did with the fishbone model, is that the brand is irreverent. The brand is rebellious. The brand is actually viewed as polarizing. Boy, do I love to hear those words in research. The brand is polarizing. When a brand is all things to all people, you take it or leave it. That's Chevrolet, folks. When the brand is polarizing, you got a lot of people that hate it. That's okay. But a lot of people that are loyal and love it. They do that because of the fact that they're participative. You don't go to Six Flags to watch. And it's about risk, right? You know, I'm going to get on the roller coaster. And then will I survive the ride? There are unowned drivers that are associated with using a theme park. Warm and caring. You want warm and caring? You want Mickey to come up and give you a hug? Go to Disney. Six Flags, last time I checked, was not very educational. Last time I checked, not many people are vacationing in Jackson, New Jersey, as an example, or just west of St. Louis, or just north of Chicago. It's not a vacation destination. Don't try to be. So Six Flags takes this data, and they probably generated a lot of the information based on utilizing something like the Fishbein model. And then they build out their brand essence, which is about thrill. But thrill in and of itself is not a business proposition. So we have to translate that into a brand promise. And their brand promise is they heighten the thrill of any ride or attraction. They never present a passive or deprivational environment. How do they heighten the thrill? Leveraging where they have competitive advantages. The association with Warner Brothers, the association with the Cartoon Network. So they have Batman the Ride and Superman the Escape. You don't find those at Disney because Disney doesn't have those connections, doesn't have those brand partnerships that they're able to leverage. So let me try to start to summarize here. Building brand equity is not about changing someone's belief about a brand. It's about leveraging it in a unique way. Haagen-Dazs. When people think of Haagen-Dazs, they think of indulgence. What's the physical attribute that's built into Haagen-Dazs that causes you to indulge? There are two things. One is they use more butter fat. Man, does that taste good. The second thing is, have you ever noticed that you cannot buy Haagen-Dazs in a big ice cream tub? Do you not think that Haagen-Dazs doesn't know how to run big ice cream tubs down the production line? Of course they do. But if I have a big ice cream tub, then what I end up doing is I end up proportioning the ice cream out into a smaller dish. That's not indulging. The way Haagen-Dazs works is you buy the smaller container, you pull off the lid, you grab the spoon, and away you go. That's why, by the way, Haagen-Dazs Light doesn't work. It's not believable. And if Haagen-Dazs felt it was so important to introduce light ice cream, wonderful. Don't call it Haagen-Dazs. Another example, Marlboro. I'm sorry, I'm going to use Michelob. When Anheuser-Busch introduced Michelob, their idea was to go after the imports. People were led to believe Michelob was imported. Michelob was brewed in St. Louis. But the idea of positioning it around the brand essence of weekends, boy, weekends, that's when special things happen. You pay more for products on the weekends. You treat yourself on the weekends. In fact, they went a step further in their advertising and actually used it in the ad tagline. Weekends were made for Michelob. Lots of Michelob folks were bought on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. Now, the next brand manager comes in, and the brand positioning does not change on the whims of the next brand manager. The next brand manager gets to evolve how we present the positioning, but they don't get to change it because that doesn't work in the consumer's mind. You can't tell the consumer I stand for this and try to come back later and say, I didn't really mean it. I really meant this. So for example, the brand manager of Michelob evolved the brand. So from weekends were made for Michelob, it became the night belongs to Michelob. Oh, the night. Things happen at night. That's a special time. Again, evolving the brand in that respect. So that's how it all works. The last thing I want to do is talk about how you extend the brand. And so if I have a brand in a status quo position, existing product to an existing target market, I can extend the brand by keeping the same target market, but creating what's called a line extension. So Coke introduces Cherry Coke. And you might say, but that's just going to cannibalize the sales of base brand Coca-Cola. The time you do that is when you're in the mature stage of the life cycle. The only way you can grow is to capture brand switchers. So what line extensions do for you in the mature stage of the life cycle is it maximizes the opportunity of brand switchers will come your way and minimizes the chances that the person buying your brand will switch out. Why? Because I'm offering more variety. Let me give you an example. I love Fig Newtons. Even I get tired of eating Fig Newtons. So I may switch to another cookie brand, but Fig Newtons does not want me to leave the brand. So what Fig Newtons does is they introduce apple and cherry and grape Newtons, increasing the probability that if I switch to another brand, it will still be within the Newtons family. And likewise, if someone is consuming Oreo cookies and they're getting tired of their Oreos, although I was told that's impossible, but they get tired of their Oreos and they're thinking of another cookie brand, but they don't like figs. But yet we want to capture them as a brand switcher. And so we offer a wider variety, apple and cherry and grape. Line extending should only be done when you hit the mature stage of the life cycle. That's the only time it's okay to cannibalize your base brand. Brand extensions, you're creating a new product targeting a completely different user or usage occasion. So let's look at how brands have done that. I'm going to jump through this because of time. So I already went through Fig Newtons with line extensions. Think about what Arm & Hammer did. First, in the lower left quadrant, they took their existing product and they captured all these new users simply by changing the ad message. It's a deodorizer for your refrigerator. How brilliant is that? The distribution channel didn't change. The production process didn't change. The only thing that changed is people who weren't doing scratch baking ran out and bought Arm & Hammer baking soda because they said, you know, you're right. My refrigerator stinks. Then they went into brand extensions, new products targeting different usage occasions. Laundry detergent, toothpaste, cat litter, deodorant. Again, those are all red ocean markets, but growth opportunities for Arm & Hammer. One that's closer to home for me, based on my own career experiences, is Smirnoff. So you've all heard of Smirnoff Ice, right? Where did Smirnoff Ice come from? Well, you have this base brand, Smirnoff 80 proof red label. One way to line extend new products, go into flavors. Now we capture brand switchers, either from other brands or minimize those leaving our brand. With Smirnoff Ice, you're creating a new product which was ready to drink and a new usage occasion, which was portability. And I'm going to give you the story on Smirnoff Ice because there was a lot of failures before they hit it on Smirnoff Ice. So if you think about how do you innovate when you're thinking about trying to extend the brand, you're trying to find that light bulb moment. The first thing you do is you define the problem and the task. This is called synectics in terms of a disciplined approach to innovating. So with Smirnoff, the problem was, how do we attract younger consumers? The product was viewed, the base brand was viewed as aging. The task was to widen the product offering. The starting point is to create a list of wishes where there are no boundaries. You don't stop and think about whether we can actually pull it off or not. So at Smirnoff, one of their wishes was, I wish Smirnoff was an entry-level adult beverage. Now from that, you start to generate ideas and action plans, and then a final product launch. So the ideas in trying to become younger, one was flavors and the other was ready to drink. On ready to drink, the action plan was to test 3 formats. One was carbonated, one was sweet, one was bitter. The carbonated ended up being what you know today as Smirnoff Ice. The sweet was taking vodka-based drinks and replicating them into a ready-to-drink concoction. So, for example, Moscow Margarita, Sex on the Beach, Electric Lemonade. There was a fourth and it escapes me right now, but there were 4. And the bitter was the Moscow Mule. And back then, and what Smirnoff actually invented, what is it? It's vodka and ginger beer. But people didn't understand it. So actually the sweet and the bitter in test market failed. Now, if you fast forward, the bitter might work now because people understand what a mule is, what a Moscow Mule is, because now bartenders are actually making them.
It's interesting because that whole sweet category now is huge with those ready to, like, RTDs are everywhere now.
Absolutely.
It's a timing issue.
The one that actually won that no one thought was going to be the winner was Smirnoff Ice, which was the carbonated. And part of it was because it used TV to launch it, which was the hidden trick here, putting Smirnoff on television, which back then the spirit companies were not on TV. And that raises awareness for the total brand portfolio. So now here's a little hint. Andrea, this is going to really tick you off. Did you know there's no Smirnoff in Smirnoff Ice?
No.
It has grain alcohol in it. And this was a
right, because it's different. Right. Okay, because it's the RTD. Okay, got it.
This was a huge debate.
Yeah.
About
it's not intuitive, but like if you think about it, all of them have grain.
You figure it's got to have Smirnoff in it, right?
Right.
But the grain alcohol is so much cheaper in cost. And what we found out was the consumer didn't care. They did care whether it had alcohol in it, but they didn't care whether it had Smirnoff in it. Okay. And then finally, some stimulants for innovation. Where do you get the ideas? It should always start with thinking about hot spots within your category. But also, you know, I know we're in the middle of COVID, but outside of COVID, travel and observe things. See how people react to things, how they live, how they walk, how they run, how they drive their cars. It leads to ideas. Study history. Innovators have commonalities. One of those commonalities is that great innovation doesn't often come from wisdom. It comes from risk-taking. Wisdom would have told Steve Jobs not to innovate a lot of products that he innovated with because market research would have stopped him, because consumers aren't very good in research in telling you how they're going to react to a new innovation. They're good at telling you how they react to what they've experienced.
And they know. Mhm.
Go with your instincts. Get out of the box. You know, one of the famous success stories with instinct was Freddie Mercury. When Freddie Mercury combined rock and roll with opera with Bohemian Rhapsody, the entire rock and roll world laughed at him. They said, that record will never be played. That record will never sell. Because wisdom said, if it's more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds long, no one's going to play it. And it ended up being a huge success for Queen. And embrace failures. Pivot for success. I'm going to stop here. I know we started a little late and I'm running just a little late, but I want to stop here because I know that Sean has got a lot to talk to you about. I hope that there were some things that you can take back with you from today and utilize it. And again, not just on consumer products, but just the thinking in terms of marketing, even if you're in a B2B type business.
That
So
was
with that,
great. Thank you.
no, thank you guys for your attention and for your and for adding to the discussion. Any questions?